So how was your drive over? Was it difficult?
Just as good as last time I was here.
It's been so long since I've seen you.
I know. It feels like it's been ages.
Oh, great. All right. Well, guys, viewers out there, have you ever wondered what a revocable living trust is? Because I know that I have in my estate planning needs for when I was doing my estate planning. And we're lucky enough today to have in the heart of the matter Adam Pollock of POLLOCK Law Firm, who is an expert estate planning attorney and also business transactional attorney, to help us understand what a revocable living trust is. And of course, I'm Ian Corzine. I run the Heart of the Matter channel. The bottom line is we're trying to get law accessible to you. We're trying to make the law work for you. So please stay tuned, and we'll talk about revocable living trusts. Adam, thank you very much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
It.
Our second video in a row. All right.
That's right.
So we're going to go through the same stuff, background and all your schooling. No, I'm just kidding. But we should talk about a little bit about your charitable work. You said that you went to West Africa at some point in time. So
I did.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So I engaged, at the age of 19 to 21, I engaged in a humanitarian religious missionary effort in West Africa and gained a really valuable education in understanding how other people around the world work.
Okay.
One of the things that I feel like I have been able to carry into my practice and how I conduct myself is empathy towards other people. Living over there, obviously, it's a third world country where I was, and one of the things that I really understood was that people who didn't have a lot still were able to find happiness.
Yes.
And they have the same problems that you and I have. Family problems, friend problems,
arguments,
individuals passing away. And so it really kind of built up this idea that we're all the same across the world. Our problems are the same across the world.
Yes.
We call them first world problems here, just because we have a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it was a really neat experience I had, a really eye-opening experience that I had, and one that I cherish and appreciate on a regular basis.
Well, it's awesome because estate planning is all about helping families and helping people, so it's very consistent.
It is.
With your future practice.
Yeah.
Now, how long has Pollock Law Firm been in existence?
We've been in existence for 5 years.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. And you want to continue to do this type of work, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really love what I do. One of the things that I found as I went through law school, and we talked about where I went to law school, which was Chapman.
Yeah.
There's this very alpha kind of personality that exists in law school, and individuals that are trying to be the very best that they can be.
Yes.
And all of us are competing
kind of
for
a
those
type
spots.
A personality. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, there was this talk of, well, if you're not the top of the class, if you're not the very best, you're not going to get the job at the big firm, and you're not going to make all the money to pay back your student debt.
Yeah.
Little did I know there was this whole world of law outside of big law and being, the type A personality all the time.
Yeah.
Now that's required in any area of the law. Perfection is key, making sure
like hardcore litigators.
Right,
Yeah,
and even in drafting our documents, paying attention to detail and all those things are very important.
Yeah.
But understanding other individuals and understanding their needs was one of the things that I felt got lost in that shuffle. And for me, going back to my roots and going back to the things that I had learned, particularly from my humanitarian efforts, was to understand other people's needs. And estate planning really gave me an opportunity to develop that and utilize that aspect of my personality.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I really fell into sometimes by luck and sometimes by choice, into the best area of law for myself.
Yeah. Us attorneys that consult with clients, we oftentimes have to deal with very difficult situations. Most people don't want to call me unless there's a really big problem. But I think you got a double whammy because a lot of times there's money at stake and also there's emotions at stake. And while there can be emotions in my situation where we're dealing with a person that had a denied insurance claim or some sort of business litigation, it's not quite as pronounced as in your practice. And so you really have to have a lot of empathy and compassion for the people you're dealing with, right?
You do.
Yeah.
There also has to be a good connection between the client and the estate planning attorney. My personality is one way, but I deal with clients from various different backgrounds, various different experiences, and trying to be able to have that connection with them above and beyond the legal work that I've been asked to do is very important. So I strive to really get to know my clients on a more individual and personal basis.
That's great.
Because I think it builds a level of trust that we can utilize in the planning process and understanding what their goals are, what their objectives are, and really what their needs are. Oftentimes what's not said in those meetings comes out later on because we've developed that repertoire and that trust and that relationship with one another.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also very good because you're young, and it's good to have a young estate planning attorney because, gosh darn it, if you do pass away, it's good to have someone who's still around to help you settle your estate.
Currently, that's the case, but I will get older.
All right, so we have Macris Ross. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Macris Ross. He's saying definitively, is it pronounced revocable or revocable?
Well, either way, it doesn't matter. Revocable means that you can always change it, alter, or amend it while you're alive.
Okay.
Irrevocable or irrevocable, as some people say,
sounds smoother. I like
means that once it's created and established, you can't change it without a court order, and it becomes much more cumbersome and difficult to do that.
Okay. So we're now into the subject matter, and we talked about in our last video probate court, and that's a situation, of course, when there's no will present or there's some difficulty in transfer of assets, and probate court is necessary. But most of us want to avoid probate court. We want to have an estate plan in place, and one of the key components of estate plan, as I understand it, is a living trust, a revocable or irrevocable living trust. Is that correct?
Yeah, having a revocable or revocable living trust is going to be the means by which a person can bypass probate. Okay.
And what is it? Is it a piece of paper? What is it?
It's a legal entity that's governed by a legal document. Okay. So if we were to make an analogy, I would utilize the idea of a corporation. Okay. A corporation can own things. Yes. It's run by either the shareholders or the officers, which are the people who create the trust and the original trustees. And then there's a bylaw, a set of bylaws that govern the corporation. Yes. And that document is what the trust is. It really governs the estate of the individual once they pass away.
And so the trust generally has beneficiaries. Correct?
Correct.
And it generally has a trustee or trustees.
Correct.
And who are the trustees?
The original trustees are the people who established the trust. So, for example, if I were to create my own trust, I would be the original trustee. Now, when I die, I have named a successor trustee, which could be you, to then govern and follow the terms of that governing document. Correct, which is that legal document, the trust.
And then the beneficiaries are the people that would receive the funds or the assets that are in the trust?
Correct. So the benefit of having a trust versus going through probate is you get to determine who gets what, when they get it, and how they get it.
Not have a judge do it, is what you're saying.
Correct. Correct. And so, for example, if you have a situation where you want to provide more for a certain beneficiary, or you have a fractured relationship with somebody else who, by law, would be a beneficiary, you can bypass them or send it a different way by establishing a trust. Now, there's other issues that come up with that, but generally speaking, you can determine what you want to do with your assets at that point.
We got a question here from AJ Harn. Hi, AJ. It says here, can you please discuss how a trust figures into asset protection for business owners?
It's a great question. There's all sorts of schemes that are available out there, but a trust primarily is for probate avoidance and to determine how your heirs are going to get it. In order to have a situation where you have trust asset protection, that individual is likely going to have to give up ownership of the asset that they're trying to protect. So, for example, moving a home into an asset protected trust, generally speaking, that person's going to have to give up their right to the home in terms of ownership, move it into a trust, and then usually it's drafted to say, well, they get to live there, but they don't own it. So giving up ownership is a scary thing for people to do, and asset protection is a very much a case-by-case scenario.
Now, I mean, and I may have misheard you a little bit, but do people ever put businesses, like a corporation, in a irrevocable trust?
Yes. So much like a home, and maybe that was the question that was being posed. Much like a home, there are shares or titles to businesses. So, for example, a stock certificate. And putting that stock certificate, rather than just being in your name, into your name as trustee, funds the trust and makes sure that if a situation where somebody dies, it follows the terms that the trust has provided, and it allows for a smooth transition.
We got a question from my buddy, Mr. Nichols, and also Nick. What property can go in a living trust?
It's a great question. The property that can go into a living trust are going to be non-qualified assets, which are going to be bank accounts, investment accounts. There are general qualified accounts that we don't put in, like an IRA. Real property should go in.
Why not IRA?
There are certain rules that IRAs have to follow. And naming the beneficiaries, which will avoid probate anyways.
I see. It's unnecessary.
Right. It's like a pay-on-death beneficiary.
I see.
And so, generally speaking, cash, stock, real property, as well as business assets, like a stock certificate for a particular business that you own, family-run business, and all that should go into the trust. Now, there's other peripheral things like expensive vehicles, expensive boats, RVs, and those kinds of things.
They can go in the trust.
Correct.
All right, tons of questions coming in. Let's see here. What about when a child has issues like drugs or alcohol and the parents are concerned about that? What can be done, I guess, in the context of a living trust?
Yeah, so drafting is very key. If that individual went through probate, they would get it at 18 with no parameters on it. And they could go ahead and utilize those funds for the habits that are destructive to them.
Okay.
Whereas in a trust, you can tightly draft or loosely draft certain language that prevents an individual from getting access or control of money on a regular basis, and allows a trustee to dole funds out for their benefit, but not necessarily hand them a check and say, here you go. So for example, you can say the trustee is to make all sorts of payments for housing or
education,
health is another one that comes up as well. And that's discretionary, and you can build in there that those funds don't come out if an individual, can't pass a drug test, hasn't been clean for 2 years, hasn't attended those things, like an AA meeting or something along those lines. So you can build that in. Okay.
This one says, and again, it's from my good buddy Mika. Does a living trust avoid estate and probate taxes?
Currently, to answer that question, is the current estate tax threshold for a married couple is $22 million or more.
Okay.
For a single individual, it's $11 million. So for individuals who now fall below that threshold, the estate tax isn't relevant currently. Now that law can change from time to time.
That's a lot,
and
too.
It has, correct. Yeah. But a trust doesn't necessarily avoid estate taxes if it's a problem.
Okay.
It's more of a mechanism to avoid probate.
Okay.
Now, estate taxes, that will be something that is dealt with also when the individual dies. They have to file a return. But while that trust is in administration, there is some tax on an income basis that does occur.
Okay.
So, for example, if an account has interest that's earned, they have to pay taxes on that.
Okay. One quick question I had, and I've had this for a long time, even though there is a part on estates and trusts on the bar, but how do we find a trust? I mean, someone passes away and there's a trust in effect, or allegedly in effect. Are trusts recorded? Are they? How do you find them? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. And there are situations when trusts become lost, but a good indicator to determine whether or not somebody who has died has a trust is to look at the assets that potentially could be in there. So for example, pulling a property deed and seeing, this is held in my parents' name in their trust, therefore they have one.
I see.
Or looking on a bank account and seeing, it's a trust bank account.
The family trust.
Or an investment account. And that'll at least alert you to a trust being in existence.
Yeah.
And then trying to piece together who has that trust is another ball of wax. And so trying to determine who they used as an attorney is sometimes easy to find. You may find a business card or a letter from that attorney in the files, but tracking down a trust, unless you know where it's at, can be difficult. So my advice to my clients is at least have a business card of mine, after I've drafted it. If you don't want to give your kids the trust, give them a card and say, hey, if something happens to us, this is the guy that did it, give him a call. And so they at least know where to go. And what they do after that, is dependent on the situation.
Okay. We've got another question in from Chris. Hey, Chris. It says here, what are some of the main differences between a living trust and a will and testament?
That's great. So a will nowadays is more of a companion document to a trust.
Yeah, it's almost like it takes over, right?
Well, actually, the trust is the primary document, and the will really acts as a companion. If you had a will just by itself, you're still going through probate. Okay.
Yeah.
The will at least determines who gets it.
Okay.
And also appoints somebody to act on behalf of the estate.
I see.
But still, we have to have that court-administered process that occurs, as well as the fees that we discussed in our probate video that we talked about.
So even if you give a will, you still got to go through probate.
Right.
Wow.
So a will alone doesn't accomplish what you're looking for. A will combined with a trust is what is key to avoiding probate. So a will nowadays really disposes of an individual's personal property, clothing, jewelry, all of those items.
Yeah.
And if you have minor children, meaning kids under 18, it appoints a guardian to go ahead and raise those children in the event that you've passed away prior to them getting to that age.
Okay.
The last part of a will is it acts as a safety net. And so if you go to the probate video, we talked about this, but I'll run the scenario again, where we have an asset that's supposed to be in the trust that gets left out for whatever reason. So a primary one is a house that's refinanced.
Yes.
It never gets moved back into the trust if nobody pays attention.
Yeah.
And so in that scenario, we have to utilize a will to then push it into the trust, okay? And so it acts as a pour over or a catch-all.
Okay.
So think of a teacup sitting on the saucer.
Yeah.
If you overfill it, the cup or the saucer catches the tea.
Catch it. Okay.
Right? And so that's what it does. And it avoids a full probate and at least gets us back to where we intended to be, which is getting it into the trust.
Okay. Now, when I did my estate planning with you, Adam.
Thank you.
We had a will, we had a trust, and then we also had something, I think it's called a healthcare directive.
Correct.
What's that?
So there are two forms of power of attorney that come up in an estate planning process. One is going to be the power of attorney for finance, okay? So if you're incapacitated, who's going to make your financial decisions on your behalf? The other one is a healthcare directive. So again, you're incapacitated. Who's going to make those healthcare decisions?
Yeah, which is a real concern these days.
It is.
Yeah.
For example, I had a friend I went to high school with, 30 years old, got hit on a motorcycle and did not have a healthcare directive.
Wow.
And his parents had to go through a very long, expensive, and cumbersome process, which is called a conservatorship here in California.
Yeah.
They're really a pain to deal with because every year you have to provide an accounting if there's money that's involved.
Okay.
And even if there's not money involved, there is a court oversight for a certain period of time while that person's still alive. And so while you're making these medical decisions on behalf of somebody, you're also having to consider, what do I have to provide to the court to make everything continue going on a regular basis.
And there's professional conservators out there, right? There are attorneys that know this law really well?
Yeah, there's private fiduciaries that can act in that capacity. There's attorneys that specialize in this world. It does cross over with a lot of the estate planning. I personally don't do many of them.
Yeah.
The few that I have done have been on a case-by-case scenario. But it's a very contentious area of the law, too, because, again, it's more about who has the right to make those decisions for a loved one.
Great. I've got a couple questions here. It says, when someone dies with a trust, how important is it to see an attorney and make sure the administration of the trust is done correctly? Hi, Macris Ross.
That's a very good question. Trust administration, much like probate, people attempt to do on their own. There are a lot of resources out there that can at least direct you and guide you, but the bottom line is there's a lot of things that go into trust administration that individuals who have done it for one time only or this first time won't know what to do, and they'll get lost in the process.
Okay.
And so hiring an attorney is going to be very valuable in the trust administration process.
Okay, great. It says, what are the pitfalls of serving as a trustee? Do you see trustees doing weird stuff that they shouldn't be doing? And I think that's a really good question, because you're right. Once you have access to a pot of assets, what's to stop the trustee from buying a limo?
Right. So the trustee essentially is a fiduciary, which means they have to act in the best interest of someone.
Okay.
And that someone or someones in this situation is going to be the beneficiaries.
Okay.
And so, yes, there are times when trustees, who are human, make very bad decisions.
Okay.
But they become liable for those decisions and therefore have to either pay back the funds that they have taken or somehow correct the error that they have made.
Wow.
But it's a learning process. And so that's why having an attorney help in the trust administration process is very key, because they can, one, watch over the trustee and make sure they're not making mistakes, but two, when the trustee does make a mistake, can help them correct it and resolve the problem without too much money being spent in litigation.
We got a couple questions. We got one from Nick, similar questions, Nick, and then also Maddie. Hi, Maddie. It says, do trustees receive any money? Do they, in other words, if you're an automatic trustee under a revocable living trust, do you get some of the assets just for being the trustee?
Sure. So trustees can be compensated, and we're talking about successor trustees. So when the original person has passed away, they can be, and those fees do vary. Certain organizations, like a financial institution, can take a percentage.
Okay. Is that provided in the trust, or is it a situation where it just is set in the law?
It's more what is reasonable in the current circumstances.
Okay.
So oftentimes trustees will be able to collect a fee on an hourly basis, but it's based on somebody of their experience and their education. And so charging $400 or $500 an hour as a trustee is not reasonable.
Darn it.
But you're going to have to look at what's going on in the current sets of the law and what is currently going on in the current setting of trustees that allows you to determine what that fee is going to look like. But most trusts provide for the blanket statement of a reasonable compensation.
Okay, great. We're getting kind of toward the end. Do you have some takeaways that the viewers should remember as far as needing a revocable living trust? They need it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look for whether or not you need to have a living trust. So determining whether you're eligible to have one is key. So having real property in the state of California or having more than $150,000 worth of assets.
subjects the barrier.
Right, subjects you to probate, and therefore you're eligible to have a trust, and you should definitely consider one.
Okay.
The other takeaway is once you've created a trust, it's essentially an empty vessel.
Okay.
Okay, so think about it as an empty cup. Unless you start to put things in or fund that trust, it doesn't serve its purpose.
Okay.
So making sure that the trust is funded is equally as important as creating one. And so it's a two-step process, one that you should seek an attorney for and get legal counsel on.
Okay, great. Well, Adam, if the viewers have more questions about revocable living trust, and it is pronounced revocable, okay? I'm just kidding. Where can they reach you?
They can reach me at my website, which I think is included in the link.
Yeah.
Or they can call me at the office and email me at the office, which is also, I think, included in the link.
Yeah, so it's POLLOCKLawFirm.com.
Correct.
And yes, I've put all Adam's links in the description section in this video, so please feel free to reach out to Adam. And also, if you have more questions about this video or other estate planning subjects, put it in the comments below. Adam and I will jointly, we'll comment on these comments and give you some responses to your questions. Thank you very much for watching today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And also, if you want more Heart of the Matter videos where we discuss how the law can be made to work for you, then please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell button so you'll be notified every Wednesday when a new Heart of the Matter video comes out. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
All right, bye. Now I gotta say, I gotta saying bye as I stop. Bye.